At 635 feet above sea level, Great Blue Hill in Milton, Massachusetts is the highest elevation on the coastal plain, from Maine to Florida. But it wasn't always that high. It was higher, much higher. 450 million years ago, a volcano transformed the hill into a conical peak. It towered several thousand feet high. Over time, erosion and moving glaciers scraped down the once prominent mountain, leaving us with the gentle hills and slopes that are now the Blue Hills Reservation. And this is where our story begins. In 1884, at just 24 years old, Abbot Lawrence Rotch conceived a plan to establish a private scientific station here to study weather and the atmosphere. The inquisitive young man was the seventh child of a prominent Boston family, whose roots went back to New England whaling and shipping. At age 15, Rotch began to keep a series of diaries and notebooks that revealed that he was a proficient weather observer. As a youth, Rotch traveled extensively with his maternal grandfather, Abbot Lawrence, who was the U.S. ambassador to Great Britain and one of the founders of Lawrence, Massachusetts. Rotch enrolled in schools in Paris, Berlin, and Florence, where he learned to speak French and German fluently. This served him well when he traveled and lectured and was internationally recognized in the new field of meteorology. He graduated from MIT with a degree in engineering. Thanks to a sizable inheritance from his father, he was financially secure and could pursue his interest in weather. In 1884, Rotch bought 2 parcels of land on Blue Hill. 1 acre on the south side, and a piece on the hill's highest point, where an old lookout tower had once stood. Rotch's brother Arthur, a respected architect, got down to work designing the new observatory, incorporating broken stone found on the site. He created a 2-story castle-like tower. At its base, a 1-story house with 2 bedrooms, a dining room, and kitchen. Construction moved ahead quickly, and in 1885, Rotch and his chief observer Willard Garish moved in. The cost of the entire project? Only $3,500. At exactly midnight on January 31st, rockets lit up the sky, announcing the Blue Hill Observatory's official opening. But that first year was fraught with endless difficulties due to the severe weather on the barren, windswept hilltop. There were leaks in the walls, freezing indoor temperatures, and frequent instrument failure. These events, as well as detailed weather data from each day, were meticulously recorded by hand. Rotch soon became a world-renowned meteorologist. He met with European and American counterparts, including the celebrated French meteorologist Léon Debourg. On each trip, Rotch embarked on the systematic acquisition of meteorological books and the best complement of recording instruments in the Western Hemisphere. In 1886, Henry Clayton, age 24, became chief observer. Clayton was particularly fascinated with clouds. He developed a system for identifying types of clouds that became the standard for use at the observatory and at many other weather stations across the country. Clayton was also interested in forecasting. He designed a method of disseminating weather predictions telegraphed from Washington by using weather flags flown from atop the observatory tower. A year later, 19-year-old Sterling Ferguson joined the staff as assistant observer to Clayton. He was not only a quick study, but a genius when it came to solving mechanical problems. Ferguson could repair almost every instrument and was soon making significant improvements that increased their accuracy and durability. 4 years after the initial structure was built, Rotch, who had been appointed Assistant of Meteorology at Harvard, added an east wing that would house his growing academic collection and provide an office for his expanded research. It included a wood-paneled library, fireproof vault, new bedroom, and shop below, connected by an ornate iron spiral staircase. In 1889, while attending a social event in London, Rotch met the stunning Margaret Randolph Anderson, a Savannah, Georgia socialite. From their first encounter, Rotch was infatuated with her and began a romance that 3 years later would culminate in marriage.
With tuppence for paper and strings, you can have your own set of wings.
In 1894, William Eddy, an expert in kites, visited Blue Hill and demonstrated how his flying objects made of cloth could lift weather instruments into the air.
Oh, let's go fly a kite.
On a windy August day, a series of Malay kites lifted a lightweight thermograph constructed by Ferguson to a height of 1,400 feet above Great Blue Hill. The thermograph measured atmospheric temperature and humidity and recorded it on a graph, the first time this had ever been done in the world. It marked the start of the ability to record temperature, pressure, and humidity around the globe. In the 1890s, the observatory used a steam-powered winch to spool in and out piano wire attached to giant kites. The winch allowed observers to better control and send their kites higher and higher, breaking records. In August 1900, they achieved the highest kite flight ever made in the world at that time, 15,793 feet. But this was arduous work. Kites would break away. Men had to search for them and the meteorograph they carried, and to retrieve long lengths of wire. Sparks often traveled down the wire, and on one near disastrous flight, a significant electrical charge shot down the wire and shocked several kite attendants. Meanwhile, during Rotch's extensive travels throughout Europe and America, he had amassed an impressive but overwhelming number of meteorological research papers and books. So in 1902, he added a west wing. This housed a new library that was adorned with a distinctive Gustavino vaulted ceiling.
Would you like to ride in my beautiful balloon?
Rotch had also become interested in balloon flight and aeronautics. He had watched with fascination as manned balloons containing weather instruments had become increasingly popular in Europe. He reasoned that instruments attached to balloons instead of kites could better measure the upper atmosphere.
Meet me in St. Louis, Louis, meet me at the fair.
Rotch chose the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair to showcase his balloon meteorograph, designed and built by Ferguson. It soared to a remarkable height of 55,908 feet, more than 3 times higher than what the observatory had ever achieved with kites. After the balloon descended, it was found 50 miles away in pristine condition. This was the first successful high-altitude balloon-sawn flight in America.
So meet me in St. Louis, Louis, meet me at the fair.
Back at Blue Hill, Rotch tried to solve the problem of continual leaks in the tower by painting and varnishing the outside, but nothing worked. So in 1908, he tore the stone tower down and replaced it with a steel-reinforced concrete tower. The 3-story tower was one of the earliest structures in the country using reinforced steel. 4 years later, at only age 51, Rotch died suddenly after an undiagnosed ruptured appendix. According to his wishes, the observatory was bequeathed to Harvard along with a $50,000 endowment fund to operate the facility. In 1913, Alexander McCady was appointed director of the observatory. and 5 years later, professor of meteorology at Harvard. He would serve as observatory director for the next 18 years. Macady was a kind, witty, and articulate man. A prolific writer, he authored numerous articles and books. He earned the reputation as one of the nation's leading scientists in the fields of fog and frost studies. New England cranberry growers counted on Macady to let them know when the next frost would occur. In the spring of 1931, Charles Brooks was appointed the observatory's director. A brilliant scholar, he had received a doctorate in meteorology from Harvard, only the second awarded in the U.S. at that time. Under his leadership during the 1930s and 40s, the observatory became world-renowned for its research and writing in the field of weather forecasting. Simultaneously, Brooks re-established the abandoned Mount Washington Observatory in New Hampshire, equipping it with the latest weather forecasting equipment, and he became its director. Among the scores of scientific instruments he donated to the fledgling observatory was Sterling Ferguson's heated anemometer. It was installed in March 1934 and just 4 weeks later recorded a world record wind speed of 231 miles per hour. Meanwhile at Blue Hill, a significant development occurred in 1935 when balloons carried a radiometeorograph into the upper atmosphere. The instrument transmitted the first ever signals of pressure and temperature data from a height of 52,000 feet. The age of the radiosonde had begun.
And here is a red balloon. I think of you and let it go.
A technology that continues to thrive today. Three years later, in 1938, John Conover became an observer. Just 2 days on the job, he witnessed the most significant weather event in the observatory's history. On September 21st, a hurricane struck Blue Hill. At 3 p.m., the wind averaged 121 miles per hour. But Mother Nature was not done. Just after 6 p.m., the wind peaked at 186 miles per hour, the highest hurricane wind recorded on any continent at that time. More than 700 people died in the storm. The 1938 hurricane remains the deadliest hurricane ever to hit New England. During the 1940s, Conover studied clouds using one of the first whole-sky time-lapse color cameras in the country. These studies documented and analyzed cloud types in motion and continued for more than a decade. In 1954, the observatory installed weather radar, and a consortium of scientists from the Air Force and MIT began research on clouds and precipitation using this advanced form of recording weather. The next 5 years would see the greatest level of activity ever achieved at the observatory. By 1956, working on the site was a complement of 42 meteorologists, research scientists, observers, technicians, and radar operators. In 1957, Charles Brooks retired. Observer John Conover took over as acting director, until Richard Goody became director in 1958. Under Goody, the emphasis of the observatory's work changed from observations and recordings to studies of high atmospheric physics. For this, he had a solar tower, or siderostat, built. It used a series of motorized mirrors to collect both the sun's direct rays and scattered sunlight. It then directed these into the West Wing laboratory for analysis. Research and numerous studies continued until the 60s, but in 1971, the long-time affiliation with Harvard came to an end. The observatory was then turned over to the Massachusetts Metropolitan District Commission, or MDC, which ran the state's parks and recreational facilities and programs. While the historic building had been saved, the long-term weather observation program was to be terminated. Fortunately, through the efforts of businessman, philanthropist, and Harvard overseer Thomas Cabot and several loyal supporters, the National Weather Bureau signed a contract with the MDC to continue the weather observation program for the next 25 years. In 1978, Robert Skilling became chief observer. He improved the observatory's record-keeping, maintaining meticulous weather observations for the next 4 decades. During its storied history, observers at Blue Hill have always been on site to document every major weather event, with one exception, the incredible blizzard of '78.
Don't know why there's no sun up in the sky, stormy weather.
For 33 hours, over 2 days in early February, southern New England experienced blinding and drifting snow, driven by wind gusts of 90 to 110 miles per hour. More than 3,500 cars and trucks were trapped on Route 128, one of Boston's main highways. They were buried in 2 feet of snow. With roads impassable, observers could not make it to the Hill on February 7th, the only day in the observatory's history without an observer present. By the storm's end, the observatory had recorded 31 inches of snow.
Stormy, stormy, stormy weather. Yeah.
In 1980, Dr. William Missinger, an avid weather enthusiast, visited the observatory and asked Chief Observer Skilling if he could have a tour. After the tour, he commented, "This is a nice place, but it looks like it's falling down. Let's see if we can get some money together and get it fixed up." Less than a year later, Missinger established the Blue Hill Weather Club and Museum, along with a strong support group that would advocate for the observatory's restoration. 3 years later, with a $10,000 grant from Harvard and assistance from the MDC, restoration began. It was completed just in time for the centennial anniversary on February 1st, 1985. Dr. Missinger then moved ahead with his next project to have Blue Hill Observatory become the first meteorological site in the nation designated as a National Historic Landmark. The campaign took more than 2 years, but it finally culminated on September 21, 1990, with a dedication ceremony and the unveiling of a bronze plaque. In 1997, the state allocated funds to completely renovate the observatory. Under the watchful eye of project manager Barbara Farina, work was completed 1 year later. That same year, Charles Orloff, an avid weather enthusiast and charter member of the Blue Hill Weather Club, retired from his position as a middle school principal and became executive director, a position he's held for more than 2 decades. In 1999, a grand reopening was attended by more than 1,500 people and broadcast live by meteorologist Mish Michaels. Michaels was instrumental in establishing a new science center at Blue Hill. She also created Women in Natural Science, or WINS, an educational program to improve self-confidence in middle school girls and to inspire them to pursue careers in math and science. In 2000, Don McCaslin was appointed program director and, with Michaels, made WINS one of the most successful weather and science programs for girls in all of New England. By 2001, the Science Center had expanded its educational programming to include a major conference for weather enthusiasts of all ages. Co-hosted by Blue Hill and the local office of the National Weather Service, it soon grew into an annual event, attracting up to 300 participants a year. One of Blue Hill's most successful educational programs has been the summer workshop Launch Your Weather Career, created by veteran meteorologist Tim Kelly. It was designed as an immersion program for small groups of students. Continuing to this day, it's motivated many young weather enthusiasts to explore careers in meteorology and atmospheric science. During the next 2 decades, the Science Center welcomed thousands of students of all ages, offering new and expanded educational programs. It's no surprise that Blue Hill Observatory won the American Meteorological Society's Outstanding Service to Meteorology by a Corporation. None of this could have happened without the support of New England's loyal meteorologists and the leadership of scores of dedicated board members. Still, in 2015, Orloff and Missinger were concerned about the rapidly deteriorating condition of the building. Masonry was cracking and falling off, creating a serious public hazard. Structural engineers determined there were serious structural issues at the tower, and that the entire top would have to be removed, including the parapets. To prepare for this major disruption, an auxiliary tower was constructed in the rear courtyard, and a duplicate suite of wind instruments installed to ensure that historic records were maintained. It would take 6 years of planning and preparation before construction would begin. Then, over the next 2 years, the entire outside of the observatory was repointed and restored, and the observatory got an entirely new roof and identical parapets. Inside, every room was painstakingly restored, from the 2 stairways to the sky to every window in the building. But the crowning jewel of the entire project was the new Michmichaels Hall for Scientific Discovery. It features historic instruments, interactive touchscreens, and current weather displays. With the observatory completely restored, it was now time to celebrate. And for 2 gala nights, more than 100 supporters filled a giant tent at the top of Great Blue Hill. Supporters gave thanks to our many friends and honored the special people who made it all happen. So, this is our story. But there's much more to come. Because we've been given a gift, and we are stewards of that gift, it is our responsibility to care for it and help it prosper. With your support, the Blue Hill Observatory will remain a vital resource, keeping precious records of the past, documenting the present, and maintaining a watchful eye on our future.
It's been great. Kids have loved it. Parents loved it. We learned a lot.
I thought it's been awesome. It's been incredibly integrative. I didn't expect it to be so hands-on for the kids.
It's measuring the temperature.
And that's been impressive, and I know it's definitely resonating with them.
We weren't sure what to expect, and we really actually had a wonderful, wonderful experience.
We look forward to educating and delighting future generations in the glories and mysteries of our weather.